Welcome to Morbid Movies, the podcast where we discuss movies that appeal to the strange and usual. I am your host, Mary. With me, as always, are my co-hosts who I lured into the cold, dark waters of podcasting, Dom and Jim.
Amazing, which is actually true because we're here because of you. Because of you, Mary. You had this idea and now we're stuck in the bleak.
I did this.
The
This
bleak.
is my fault.
Yeah. My skin's been removed. I've been, my bits are flying in space. Bits of me. That's where we are now. Anyway, yes. How are you? How are you, Jim? I know we do all this off record, but it's just nice. It's nice for our audience, all three of them, to know about our very exciting personal lives. Everybody okay?
I'm doing well. Yeah, nothing to complain about.
I love it. I love it. Mary, you good?
Okay.
Fantastic. So much energy. This was a really interesting one to do, and this is one of them. One of the few, which makes me sound like I hate when you suggest films, Mary. I don't. I just have some of them I love and some of them I don't. This was one that I loved. I'm very, very happy to be doing this with you guys. First time I'd ever seen it.
Freddy versus Jason. You have lost all rights to criticize me on this.
I'm also guessing you were Spawn too, so
I was.
That's cute now. Yeah.
I absolutely
all the bad
was.
movies have been Dom.
Shut up! Shut up! God damn it! You edit the podcast. No, I'm joking. Right, let's go into it. So there's some pretty heavy stuff in this, Mary, themes wise, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Jim, I want your thoughts on this. This was my first time I'd ever seen this film.
Sorry, did we say what movie? Did I miss that? Did we actually tell the audience?
I know. Under the Skin, the 2013 Under the Skin is what we're doing. I'll just put it on the. I'll put the poster up first. We'll
Professional podcasters.
Under the Skin 2013. Some serious, intense themes.
Not a film for the faint of heart. So we are doing Under the Skin, the 2013 film, which is directed by Jonathan Glazer and stars Scarlett Johansson. So this film has Scarlett Johansson playing an extraterrestrial being who lures men to a strange black dimension where they are processed and consumed, basically, as the brief description. But so how did everybody feel about this one?
Heavy and dark. Set in Glasgow, couldn't be any more. I mean, I love Glasgow, but it is rainy and miserable, much like the north of England, as we were talking about off record. And I thought it was a great setting. I was super impressed with Scarlett Johansson's accent. I was super impressed with the aesthetic of the film. I thought it was heart-wrenching, and there's some really dark, emotional stuff in here, which we'll get to. Again, first time I'd ever seen it. Again, this is what this podcast is for, hanging out with you guys, my old friends that I love very much, and also discovering really interesting films. And I certainly feel like with this episode, we've done that, because this was heavy. Lots of really, really poignant themes as well. Which we'll talk about in a minute. I want to pick up the sexism, the isolation, kind of the comparison between humans and animals. I think is quite interesting to discuss here. But first, I sort of want to bring in the key facts that you prepared, Mary. As always, you bring in some key facts. One of the things I thought was kind of, I'm not sure how to feel about this, but I thought it was interesting, was that the men that were lured into the van by Scarlett Johansson's character were not actors. The director, Jonathan Glazer, had hidden cameras installed in the van and only informed the men afterwards that they were in a movie. Now, that's either a very cool way to create, or also a really, really damning indictment of male, just we can be real dicks and we'll do anything for, to get laid, I guess, not to put it in too fine a point of it. Mary, how did you feel when you were sort of digging up that fact? And also, are there any other ones that you want to discuss?
Interesting. I feel like it does lend a little bit of credence to some of the presentation of the film that I think some of the men were actors, like the ones that you see in later scenes, I'm pretty sure were hired, but some of those men were just lured into the van. And it gets, the contrast gets me because now, if I was walking down the street and someone rolled up in a serial killer trope on wheels and started asking me questions like, are you alone? Where are you headed? Basically, will anyone notice if you go missing? I would not accept a ride from that person. But these men got asked these incredibly creepy questions by someone in an unmarked white van and then hopped in with her because she was attractive. And I think it really does kind of illustrate a huge difference between how genders approach an interaction with a stranger like that. Because never in a million years, no matter how attractive the driver was, would I have hopped in and taken a ride from that person after those questions. So
Yeah.
I don't know, and I don't want to paint too broad of a brush because there's probably men who did refuse that aren't featured in the film, but the fact that they got any just like kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, well, I mean, like Mary said, it does show the difference between gender dynamics. And I think for the men, men are much more safe in a situation like that because we are physically stronger than the average woman. So had Scarlett Johansson turned out to have been a serial killer, like Mary suggested, then, a lot of those men could have overpowered her. But a lot of the reason they went with her wasn't just because she's attractive. She was also really charming. She was disarming them. She was asking questions about them. So she was basically keeping them at ease, and she was basically, she was using her, a lot of her power was subterfuge and guile, not so much just like, hey, I'm attractive, come with me. It was a balance of both.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And I mean, it does kind of, one of the wider themes I wanted to talk about was sexism and sort of the wider subjectification of women. But actually, that's an interesting point. There was much more to it. Do you think that, and I've read a lot of, and I've seen a lot of, as I'm sure you guys have in your research, a lot of video essays that say that this film is about, it sort of calls into question sexism in modern society, but also the weaponization of sex about. But there's obviously platforms that are there to for women to make a lot of money these days, things like OnlyFans and stuff like that. And I've seen a lot of video essays that say while that those things are very empowering and very important for people who want to kind of feel comfortable in their body, it also sort of shows that again, because men can be quite predatory in different times. I'm going off on a massive tangent, but it's interesting that these 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 themes do apply in society in 2026. So a lot of these themes are very, very present today. I don't know what you guys think of that, because again, there's a lot of these discussions that can be had today about sexism, about the sort of the empowering females against the male gaze.
So one of the reasons that this film and kind of the sexual dynamics that it brings is still relevant is because I think they're inherent to human beings in general, and in terms of your question about, something like OnlyFans, I mean, I see it as both empowering and exploitative because these women are becoming kind of a male ideal in order to then turn it around to become powerful by it. They're not choosing to become what they think is, an ideal, but rather becoming that male ideal and, in order to gain power over men. At the same time, it can be exploitative of men as well, because in this movie, she is definitely using that femininity to exploit the men and then harvest them for whatever purpose. And, with something like OnlyFans, a lot of that stuff is, the term escapes me, but basically a lot of those women are either messaging men back and forth to kind of form a bond with them. So then they'll buy more, photos or videos or what have you, or they even have a team of people doing that. So it's not even them. So the exploitation does go both ways. So I can't necessarily say if it's empowering because I don't know any, OnlyFans girls or cam models or anything like that. But it is a situation where they are, in some cases, making good money, working within a system that's not necessarily fair to anyone.
For as far as it goes, I would say like one thing that's important to bear in mind is like something that can be empowering for one woman can also be oppressive for another, which like I do have some friends who have OnlyFans, pages and really enjoy doing that kind of work. And, you know, and in conversations with them, a lot of them said that they actually spend a lot of their time talking to men who are just really lonely and just really need somebody, anybody to talk to. And they're filling that gap in providing a service. And it's like, it can be exploitative, certainly, but it can also, you know, be a very important connection for people who maybe otherwise don't have any outlet. Especially, like, I know it's been talked about a lot recently in this country. We do have a crisis where a lot of men, they don't feel comfortable going and getting help, going to therapy, but they might feel comfortable talking to a woman on an OnlyFans page. A sex worker feels to them like a more accessible, safer, nobody's going to criticize their masculinity situation. Because for a lot of men, outside of maybe their mother or their wife or their girlfriend, they don't feel comfortable talking to their friends about their feelings. So sometimes, you know, imperfect solutions are the best we have in this world. You know, and to circle back to the film a little more, I think it's complicated because Scarlett Johansson, certainly her character in the first half of the film seems dominating. She's luring these men and she's using her attractiveness to do so. But she's also a tool being used to lure these men in, because, you know, it's implied in the film and more explored heavily in the book it's loosely based off of, that these men are being harvested for food because they're a delicacy on this extraterrestrial home world. So she's not doing this really for herself. It's a job she's been created for as well. So she's kind of caught in that system as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I never really heard, because I have friends that work in that industry as well. That again find confidence in that, but then also they're very much exploited. That they feel like they have to live their whole life by it because they define themselves by it. You know, by the money they can make and by the people that love them, kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? So it's interesting to get your perspective on it, because I'd never heard of it. Like, actually, these tools can be used, these platforms can be used as a form of therapy, almost, you know, a form of even support. I know, but that may be a stretch to some viewers, but it's an interesting perspective. There's also that second part of the film where Laura, Scarlett Johansson's character, sort of is trying to find that connection, but then, you know, because she is different, she can't achieve, you know, for example, you know, sex in its purest, we'll use the term, form. And I do think there's a lot of, you know, I was certainly taken aback by the sort of the theme of othering. You know, what do you guys think of the that sort of isolation theme, which I've kind of pulled out, because I do think there's a lot of different elements of this that allude to the isolation of not only Laura's character but other people as well, and kind of it feels like a criticism of society at large. I think, and this is quite a wide claim, that this film is a pretty big criticism of how we are as humans and how we treat other people and how also we treat ourselves.
Alienation and isolation are huge themes in this film. Is, you know, it's like initially she is preying on men who are isolated and maybe alienated from society. They're people who don't have friends, don't have family, won't, you know, be noticed if they go missing necessarily, which is why she chooses them. And as the film progresses, you also see that, like, as she tries to be more human, she doesn't pull that off either, and ends up very, very isolated herself as well. So I do think that that's like central to the film. And I think it's, truthfully, like, I think it's always been a problem for humanity, but I feel like in the, you know, era we live in, when it's easy to just not leave your house pretty much ever, it's definitely a growing problem. So I think that it remains relevant.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this movie, in a broad sense, is about connection and, you know, trying to connect with other people, you know, especially when you're alienated, but just in general. Um, you know, I mean, if you look at every guy that went with her was going because in some way she made them feel good or connected. Yeah, so I think the film actually uses sex as a means of connection in a way, because if you kind of look across all animals, you know, almost every one of them desires some kind of connection to a point. And even if that connection is just through sex, like almost everything, you know, even asocial animals need to come together for reproduction. And there are very, very few asexual animals that just kind of exist in their own little world. So, by, using sex as a means of connection in this film, it's kind of connecting Scarlett Johansson's character, the alien, to humanity, who they kind of see as animals. They don't see them as, unique individual people. So, that sexual connection is something that kind of, spans life, you could
Yeah,
say.
Scarlett Johansson's character, at least in the early going, is very cold, very, very calculated, very alien. And I think that I think that is a point that we don't tend to pay attention to stuff. We don't tend to give a monkeys if it doesn't affect us, or if it's not causing us pain, or if it's not in the benefit of us. I know that that's obviously quite a wide statement. It goes back to what, Mary's point earlier. These sites, platforms, etc., can be really good for connection, but they can also be very exploitative. I don't know what the solution to that is. I guess it's just everybody policing themselves, being aware of their mental health and how isolated they feel, how and going out and getting help. Maybe I don't know what you guys think of that. It's quite abstract, but I certainly feel like there's a stark difference between the first half of the film and the second half of the film. Is it about us being aware of boundaries, and is this a cautionary tale just to tell us to be careful who we trust?
I think a lot of the film does put an emphasis on like you need to be aware of red flags, and the men she preys on missed those red flags when she asked them those probing questions. But she, at the end, when she encounters that logger, misses the exact same red flags because he asks her in with his other, more friendly conversation. It's a, "Are you out here alone? Is anyone with you?" questions, which, as a experienced human being, immediately had my hackles raised because those are red flag questions if you are alone in the woods and you've encountered a stranger. But she doesn't, even though she was a predator herself, understand that because she lacks the experience. And I think that is a huge part of this. Is as much as humans can be wonderful and beautiful and interesting, there is also a lot of dark sort of bleakness to humanity as well, and that's a lot of what this film does explore.
There's a really interesting point that a couple of people picked up in my research, like about how the alien, the Ghost Rider or the motorcycle man, the guy that's controlling Laura in this, the body that he picks up. The implication is that they used to be an alien as well, that they were an alien, and they also caught the feelings, caught the emotions that we see Laura catch. Is there a hopeful spin that we can put on this, that actually, even if we have the most traumatic life experiences, there is still hope in the world, even if there are red flags, even if there are people out there that are quite clearly dicks, to put to put a finer point on it, that we will always there will always be beauty in the world. Is there a place for that in this film, or am I being too hopeful, Jim?
I mean, I think you're really putting a positive spin on this film. I feel it a lot more. I don't think it's a bleak film, but I think it's a little bit dispassionate and it's just kind of observant of humanity. And I think that the initial woman who, I got the same reading that you did, that was, a previous version of Scarlett Johansson that then, for whatever reason tried to connect with humanity, and we don't know exactly what happened to her, but she died. Um, I think that basically what this cycle is saying is just that the natural order of living creatures is to connect. She interacted with humans, she tried to connect with them. Scarlett Johansson interacted with humans, she tried to connect with them. It's just kind of the way things happen. When you interact with anything, if people didn't exist, if you were the last person and there were, some other kind of animal, dogs, cats, you'd probably try to form a community with them. It's just a natural order of living creatures to have some kind of connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think the sort of repetition of the word connection, sort of permeates this podcast, but it was certainly a big part of the film. Uh, we brought up animals a few times, and one of the more abstract sort of points that I saw people raising was sort of the comparison of how we treat animals. This was a little bit more off the cuff, but I thought it was an interesting one to bring up. Of course, we're harvested for meat in this film. That humanity is being harvested for meat, by an uncaring, alien kind of because they want food, as Mary sort of alluded to earlier. Is there a fair comparison here to how we treat animals and how we treat sort of species, even well, I suppose it goes into people as well, people that are considered lesser or othered, people that look a little different, of course. I mean, again, not to get too abstract, but do you think that's a fair, kind of themic comparison? Humans are kind of the animals here, and we're preyed on in a similar way, kind of an uncaring way as how we might go to the grocery store, buy meat, or again, how we treat animals that kind of anything we don't really understand. I guess that's the wider point on it. I don't know what you think of that. We'll start with Mary on this one.
I think that is a fair comparison in this film. Is it definitely starts out with, yeah, humanity being treated as a resource for harvesting, and the only consideration seems to be selecting victims who won't be missed, which is more to avoid attracting attention than anything else. um and I think it definitely is a theme that carries on throughout the film, especially like I found the beach scene to be especially harrowing in that way, just sort of the like disregard for this human tragedy that's taking place on the beach, right in front of her, and again with the motorcycle man returns as well. And I think there is a certain criticism of that, because like on a certain scale, humanity, we do that to animals but also to each other. It's like we ignore famine and wars and genocides that are taking place in other countries because it's sort of, well, nothing to do with me, what am I supposed to do about it? And you just kind of look away from those things because it's easier than dealing with it for many people. So I definitely think that that's a theme that gets explored in this film as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it certainly hit home. I was very, very pleased. And anytime Adam Pearson appears on the screen, I think it's fantastic. Not, it's nothing to do with diversity or inclusion or anything like that. I think he's a great performer, and he's become more prominent in British and American films over the last few years. I think he's a great talent. So it was great to see him in the film. But obviously, again, that theme of being othered, sort of is particularly prominent in the film, and that's one of the things, because we'll do the favorite scene and the roundup in a minute. There's a couple of things that I wanted to talk about first, and the beach scene, is probably the most harrowing scene. It's not my favorite scene in terms of impact. But of course, the idea these this sort of uncaring alien species would leave the baby, just because obviously they don't understand what a baby is, probably. But particularly harrowing again. What did you guys think that scene communicated? To me, it was like, again, that we sort of leave things and avoid things and don't want to deal with things that make us uncomfortable. I guess it couldn't extend to, passing someone, asking for money on the street, or, anything that looks a little different. People have certainly done that to me, over the years, various forms. Just avoided my gaze, or avoided, making eye contact, things, because people that look a little different or move a little different make people uncomfortable. So I certainly felt for the baby. Obviously, I think that was by design. You feel for the baby. What happens to the baby? We don't know what happens to the baby. Does the baby die? But I thought that was definitely the most harrowing scene, like you said, Mary. So for that scene particularly, for me, it was about kind of how cold and uncaring we can be to things that we don't really want to deal with.
So, I mean, at least for me, I see it a little bit more, in terms of trying to connect it to something external from the movie. It to me is just a way to illustrate how cold Scarlett Johansson is at the beginning of the movie. There's that scene is really well constructed into somewhat everyone will feel something in that scene, whether it's the dog getting pulled out to the riptide, the woman trying to save the dog, the man trying to save his wife, the good Samaritan trying to save the man, or the baby who's just left alone. You're going to feel empathy for something there, but she doesn't, and the motorcycle driver doesn't. And then as you go through the film, that it shows a really big shift when she meets Adam and she empathizes with him and eventually lets him go. Whereas, just 30 minutes earlier in the movie, she didn't care about a baby. So it shows a really stark contrast to how she transitions through the film.
I was really struck by, and I'm often struck by a great soundtrack, but I thought this was the soundtrack was not just good, it was used very well in context of the film and the progression of the film.
Yeah, I think that the soundtrack in the film is interesting. One of the things that I noticed when I was watching the film is there's actually like significant portions of the film that have absolutely no music, and then a lot of times the music seems to occur when something kind of scary or disturbing is happening, and after a while, it felt almost like a Pavlovian response. I would hear music and I would have that, oh, something messed up is about to happen reaction. And also I think that the lack of music and the reliance on just sort of the ambient noises of the activity in the film worked really well to like build a certain amount of tension as well. So I was actually quite taken with just the overall the soundtrack and the audio engineering, and the music is interesting too because they didn't decide to go with like a lot of like pop music like a lot of films do or anything like that. Like a lot of it is very like piercing and not what you would necessarily expect from like film scores, even a lot of horror film scores. So like um I think that it did a lot to add to the atmosphere of the film.
Yeah, 100%. Jim, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I building on what Mary said, she said that there are large chunks of the film that don't have sound. A lot of this was in the back half of the film when she's trying to move away from being a predator. Um, a lot of these moments, she's not kind of up to anything sinister. So we get basically no non-diegetic sound. So it's just, her trying to connect with people, not really up to anything. Another big moment where there is no sound is when she's first talking to Adam, the disfigured man. It's just kind of a nice back and forth between them. But once he starts to kind of buy into her seduction and starts to trust her, the music starts kicking in. So at first it's kind of just this, we know it's not an innocent interaction, but once the music starts kicking in, you're just like, oh no, as we know she's going to take him.
Yeah, yeah. Again, it builds that atmosphere, and again, I guess it sort of leads back into that horror trope, and it becomes like a horror film, drama, etc. Because of that, and the music is a fantastic use, and a way to get to that as well. So I just wanted to shout out the soundtrack because I do think it was, really, really well done. Across the board, and again, the use of sound design by Mika Levi, to get certain points across. All right, so we'll round up now. We'll do favorite scene. I think a lot of people, it seems to be the clippable, thing that people tend to go back to from this film is, of course, the stripping down, and the looking at the face of Laura Scarlett Johansson. When she removes the skin and you sort of see the black, I guess cold original alien body, and of course the context in which that happens, of course, very, very intense. This alien has finally discovered what it's like to feel as a human, but then it's about to be killed because of being different. I thought there was a lot to this.
My favorite scene or scenes would really be I was really fascinated by the scenes that are in that black room or pocket dimension where she's luring them in, where she's stepping backwards and she's able to walk over the like really shiny floor, but then for the men it turns into liquid and they start to descend. I don't know, there's just something visually captivating about those scenes for me, and also just like it's an interesting juxtaposition anytime, because I don't see it that often in a film. It's like she's the predator and they're just sort of like transfixed and walking forward and don't even seem to fully grasp what's happening, like they're in a trance almost. So I just found those scenes to be like very interesting and compelling and like almost exploitative of the men, because it's like she doesn't actually fully undress in most of those scenes, but the men do, and you do get these long full frontal nudity shots of men, which are also, at least in American cinema, not I think quite as much in European, but it tends to be a little bit more rare in film than full frontal female nudity. So like I just found the reversal in those scenes to be interesting.
So I really love the opening scene. And one of the reasons, the opening scene is doing a lot of heavy lifting in this movie. So there is no expositional dialogue in this entire movie. Everything that we know about what's happening, we have to figure out from visual and audio clues. And in terms of the opening, I mean, I like it because it's kind of mysterious and abstract. We don't know exactly what's going on, but the brief glimpses we see of the eye being built and Scarlett Johansson learning how to talk, we can figure out that she's being born or she's being created. But the visuals are very evocative of space. There's large black, there's just a lot of black. We have little spheres that kind of remind you of planets or a sun. There's even a shot that reminds me of an eclipse. So it's a little bit abstract, and we have to kind of read between the lines to figure out that she's an alien. And because we don't actually know what's going on with her until the end scene, when she takes off that skin and we see that she's just some kind of black creature. So I think it kind of sets the tone for what's going on. There's something otherworldly about her right from the beginning.
I hope that if you've not seen this film, the people that watch this go and check it out because it is really, there's some lovely moments. Obviously, cool to see Scotland and Glasgow used so prominently. You get to have actually a really decent English accent by Scarlett Johansson, in my view. There's some nice shots of people wandering around Glasgow as well. I think that also signifies the change in the view of the character of Laura as she sort of sees the good in people. We haven't mentioned. I mean, Mary may mention it when we do the roundup, but the viral clip that went around of Scarlett Johansson's character falling over and the people of Glasgow coming to pick her up. I thought that was a really nice transitional point in the film where she starts to realize that okay, humans can be really good, and so I just want to sort of add that in there as another point of like, that was just done by shots of people, shots of people being just going about their day. I thought that was a really, really lovely bit of the film. That just goes to show how people can be, people just doing their thing. People can be really helpful and fundamentally good. Mary, we've only covered maybe kind of a couple of the facts that you brought in and you researched. Is there anything before we finish up that you would like to sort of add and talk about?
Just building off what you were just talking about, that scene where Scarlett Johansson trips, one of the things that I had flagged was that before the film came out, paparazzi images of her tripping had hit the internet because it was a hidden camera scene, so people didn't know they were filming, and that actually became somewhat of a like viral meme, and I've seen it pop up before, but I didn't realize what it was from. But I think it's interesting that one of the film's like big influences, even for people who haven't seen it, is just this impact on internet culture that it's sort of been added to those like memes that we trade around and make jokes about. So I thought that was a sort of fun little fact in there. And I think the other one that I had flagged as kind of interesting fact was with the casting of Adam Pearson, um, because they wanted someone who they didn't want to use prosthetic makeup. They wanted to use someone who genuinely had neurofibromatosis. I hope I said that right. And that they actually integrated a lot of his input into the scenes that he's in as well. And I think that was a nice choice. I think it makes the film a lot realer in those scenes that he was able to contribute to how they interact and how he thinks that would have played out.
Yeah, absolutely. A very nice touch. And again, a great testament to the crew and the cast on this film. Very, very well done. Again, great film, 2013's Under the Skin, starring Scarlett Johansson, Adam Pearson. Themes of isolation, sexism.
I think the other thing is I was actually curious about this is when I was watching the film, especially when it got towards the end, I was kind of struck by, even though it's like it's a sci-fi horror film and it's definitely very modern, there was like sort of a almost folklore underpinning. Like the film, I kept thinking about The Little Mermaid, not the Disney singing fish version, but the original Hans Christian Andersen story, where at the end when she realized she can't make it as a human, she like basically evaporates into like a cloud of smoke and becomes a sky spirit instead. And I felt like there was a sort of a strange, almost inverted parallel with some folklore stories there. And I haven't seen much of anybody else talk about it, so I don't know if this was just me, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting. What made you go down that rabbit hole, Mary? Was it just intrigue or?
Yeah, you know, I think some of it, you know, is like, I'm trying not to spoil things too much, but just how the film ends specifically feels a lot like how the original story ends. But instead of her trying to become human because of, you know, an intense curiosity and wonder for the human race, she starts off very dispassionate, and then it thinks it's so it's kind of like a I'm trying to think what's the word I'm looking for. It's like an inversion of that story. I don't know. It felt like there was sort of a strange parallel there for
Yeah,
me.
yeah. I think that's actually a good one to put out to the audience. Obviously, we appreciate every comment that we get, and it's nice that people have been engaging with our content a little more. So, if you do have any thoughts on that last point about the folklore elements of this film, please do stick it in the comments, and we'll reply as soon as we can. Guys, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you. It's been a long time since we did the last one. Mary, what are we doing next? Where can people find us? And Jim,
Okay.
get ready for your moment.
I guess we're doing Willard next. That'll be cool. I haven't actually seen that one.
Yeah,
So
it's the 2003 version, starring Crispin Glover, which I first watched when I was in Keene actually, and it made me fall in love with Crispin Glover. He's a weird actor, but and this is a weird film. Yeah, so that's what we're doing next. Yeah, and
okay. So
where
I
do
guess
people
I'll do the
find us?
contact
Yeah.
info then. So if you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at morbidmoviepod@gmail.com. We're on Instagram at morbid movies podcast. I did have to pick a tongue twister title, didn't I? On Twitter, we're Morbid Movies Pod, TikTok at morbid.movies.pod, and on Blue Sky, we're Morbid Movies.
Did we actually update any of those? Have we even checked them? Has anybody checked the emails recently?
I get notifications for the emails, so I do know if we get any. We don't get much email outside of like, you know, like statistics about the show.
Okay, that's all right. Well,
And
I
I'm
was
gonna be honest here. I mostly keep an eye on the Blue Sky and a little bit on the Instagram. I don't go on Twitter because you said you were running that one.
Oh yeah, I haven't been on it in ages. It's fine. Well,
Yeah, find me on Blue Sky. That's where I'm most active with
yeah,
this.
it's cool. We'll get to you. We'll get to you. Send us an email and we'll get to you. Thank you guys so much for your time. Jim, what do we do now? Historically, every single podcast. What is it we do, Jim?
Keep it spooky.
Yeah. Bye, guys. See you later.